Hello to everyone viewing on Dine Sports, and welcome to our breakdown of UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. We have an exciting card coming to us this Saturday from Anaheim at the Honda Center with Alexander Volkanovski returning to 145 pounds to make defense of the featherweight title against an undefeated challenger. Very excited for this card. Nick, how are you? How are you feeling about the fights this weekend?
I'm good, man. Definitely looking forward to this card. We've had a few kind of lofty Apex offerings the past few weeks, a lot of low-level fights, so feels good to get some big names in front of us here, and definitely looking forward to this main event. No doubt Topuria is deserving of his title shot. Volk, I mean, he's been up and down the weight class. I think he's back where he belongs at 145, so really looking forward to see how he's going to do here. And yeah, a lot of fun spots on this card. I think we got some good spots to consider betting as well. So definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll dive into that right now. Looking first at the main event of the evening, Volkanovski, a minus 125 favorite over the small underdog Ilya Topuria. Um, Topuria undefeated, very impressive as a challenger here, coming in on a good win streak. The most recent fights, honestly, a favorable stylistic matchup against Bryce Mitchell, where Topuria did excel. But I mean, the win over Josh Emmett most recently, super impressive. We got to see Topuria's boxing on full display. He's a very complete striker, very fast hands, and a serious power threat here at featherweight. We've seen him put guys out cold. Obviously, that didn't happen in the fight with Emmett. And I think while a path to victory for Topuria, what he sees here, a knockout of Volkanovski, I think that's going to be a very tough thing to do. I mean, Volkanovski, super complete fighter. Obviously, the loss to Islam Makhachev in his most recent fight, but now back in the weight class he belongs, a weight class where he is the bigger man, the stronger man, benefiting from a 2.5 inch reach advantage over the challenger Ilya Topuria. I think he's going to have the much more sophisticated attack over the course of 5 rounds here, implementing a heavy, dose of leg kicks, slowing down the oncoming challenger. Topuria has his right side exposed a lot, not only to the kicks, but also his right hand's always cocked, leaving himself exposed to a lot of counter shots. I think Volk is going to find success striking here. He may get clubbed, may have some dicey moments on the feet against Topuria, but even if that is the case, we've seen what Volk's able to do in the clinch. We see him implement wrestling on occasion, and perhaps here in this fight, using it as a means to winning minutes, winning rounds against a dangerous challenger. But I just feel like Volk's being undervalued here. We've seen him against like super high level featherweights. A guy like Yair Rodriguez, Max Holloway, they're probably in pick'em fights against Topuria at this stage in his career. So I found it hard to warrant him being such a small underdog against the current champion. And I mean, I think Volk's still a complete fighter. Obviously, a little hesitation for some backing him as he's now getting into the 30s, but still, it's hard to go against this guy. We've seen what he's been able to do, the top featherweights for a super long time. And even though Topuria is a dangerous challenger, an exciting young challenger, I don't think he's going to be able to get over Volkanovski.
Yeah, so I think the fear here is obvious. Whenever you have a guy get KO'd like Volk did, albeit up a weight class, albeit on short notice, you have to have some concern about their durability. And I mean, it's only been 4 or 5 months since that fight took place, and I think that's the main reason this line is as narrow as it is. Holloway's the better striker in terms of technical ability to Topuria, but the one thing Holloway doesn't really bring to the table against anyone is power. So it is a tough stylistic matchup. Topuria is a solid grappler. Volk, when he was making his rise through the UFC, was more of kind of a ground and pound threat. He'd take guys down, beat them up on the mat. I mean, that might be his clearest path to victory here. It's tough. I'm very high on Topuria as a prospect. I love him. I've backed him in pretty much every single one of his fights since he's been in the UFC. But you're right, he has had moments where he's been rocked, and I don't know that we're going to see that here from Volk, but it does cause for some concern. I will say against Emmett, he did a really good job defensively. Yes, he drops that hand, but it was almost as a means to set up counter shots and things like that. So I don't know. Volk does throw more volume than Topuria, lands almost two more significant strikes per minute, and that's coming against a very high level of competition. Both these guys have elite striking defense. Topuria, though, 67% he's defending strikes at the UFC level. Again, not nearly the level of competition that Volk's been facing, but that is notable for for sure. One big thing coming into this fight is just the narratives. I mean, Topuria seems absurdly confident, like talking like he's already won the belt. May have cursed himself a little bit, walking around posing with the belt yesterday during the photo session. Volk had to go in and grab it from him. Like it was kind of like a light, funny moment, but historically that never goes well. I mean, we saw Derek Lewis do it before, a few other guys, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not one to get into jinxes too much, but not really a good look. And I agree. I mean, if Topuria was like plus 200 or plus 250 here and wasn't such a trendy pick, I'd maybe consider taking him at value, just like I don't know, thinking he has a pretty good shot here. I think maybe 3 out of 10 times he could win this fight, but it's lined close to even. So I'm on Volkanovski. And interestingly enough, there's been this thing like guys in title fights or girls over 35 years old have not been defending or capturing the title over the past few years. But on the last pay per view card, we had Raquel Pennington break that curse. So maybe we no longer have to worry about that for Volk here. Toporia's going to have a speed advantage in the pocket. I do think Volk could get clipped early, and that's the fear. But as long as he survives those early rounds, which I think he will, I mean, he already looks in amazing shape. That fight he got KO'd by Islam, he was noticeably out of shape, like moving up a weight class. And he talked about how he was drinking, eating pizza, all this crap. But I don't know. He's dialed in. I think he knows that he's being disrespected here a little bit. And who's to say like he just doesn't bounce back in a massive way? I'm just baffled by the line here. I do think this is going to be a competitive fight. I'm going to back Volk. I'm going to have money on him at the money line, but I don't know. I mean, the line just doesn't match um, the quality of opponent that these two guys have been facing. So I don't know. I get coming off the head kick KO. It's scary to back a guy against a power puncher, but yeah, I think stylistically they're two very similar fighters. We've just seen more from Volkanovski. Topuria, I think, maybe a little bit too big in his own head, or I don't know. I worded that wrong. You know what I mean? His head's got a little bit too big here, and yeah, you got to be a little bit delusional. You got to be confident. We've seen this time and time again for these guys in these title fights. That is how you kind of get over that hump. But it's like he's overcompensating at this point. So yeah, I'm on Volkanovski here. I think it's a competitive fight. I think if Topuria does find a finish, it's going to be on the feet early. But I think Volk could kind of use those clinch strikes, keep pressure on him against the cage, force Topuria to wrestle a little bit more than maybe he wants to. Topuria may be the better technical grappler, but I don't think it's a wide margin. And I know that Topuria doesn't like to grapple much because of the cardio issues we've seen from him at times in fights where he is grappling, including his debut against Youssef Zolal. Like, I mean, we're not too far away from that. He's only been in the UFC 2 or 3 years. And yeah, I'm as high on Topuria as anyone as a prospect, but I just think at the price, folks, is kind of the no-brainer pick. I think the market's kind of overcorrected itself off that Islam Makhachev fight, and you know how high I am on Islam. Probably the best fighter in the promotion right now, so no harm in getting KO'd there on short notice, out of shape. I am a little bit concerned that Volk's durability does take a step back. We do see once a guy goes out like that, it's rarely the same, but at the same time, I think I don't know. I don't think his prime is going to close that quickly. I'm here on Volk mostly at the price more than anything. Not super confident, but I don't see how you don't play him minus 120 to minus 130.
Yeah, I think as well, those last two camps, a lot of wrestling involved. So certainly if he's going to go that path against Topuria, it's going to be to his advantage. Yeah, Topuria's a nifty grappler, but I don't see him catching Volk in the choke or anything like that. The bigger man's going to be getting on top and controlling those positions. Yeah, the market is completely adjusted, I think, as a result of that last fight. If it didn't happen, if we don't see Volk head kicks, there's nothing warranting this line. And even the fight before, if that decision were to go Volk's way, it's a completely different title picture we're looking at. So it's gonna be a good one. Very fun featherweight main event. We'll look now at the co-main event at middleweight with Robert Whitaker looking to bounce back here, a minus 250 favorite against Paulo Costa. Nick, I know Whitaker's one of your favorites. It was tough his last time out. But what are we feeling here against a similar stylistic matchup, Paulo Costa?
It's similar and it isn't. So the thing about Duplessis is he rushes forward. He has these explosive breaks, and he can make them happen anywhere. The thing with Costa, he's only really that explosive and aggressive when he has someone backed against the cage. And to me, Whitaker is going to be very, very difficult to back against the cage here. I think the line's mostly warranted. I hated that performance from Whitaker. Obviously, I still think he has the skills to beat Duplessis if they fought a bunch of times, but they're not going to, unfortunately. The thing with Costa, he's been out for a very long time. He does appear to be in excellent shape. We always have to worry about what he's going to look like the week of his fights. I mean, the Vittori fight, he came in 20 pounds over and famously said, "That's your problem, Marvin. You got to deal with that now." And, I don't know. I like Costa too. I like both these guys a lot. I just think Rob is totally keyed in here. Am I a little bit concerned about his durability, similar to Volkanovski coming off a KO loss? Yes, but it's not like he was totally starched in a way that Volk was. Like he was mangled. Like the fight got called at the right time, but he wasn't unconscious. So I don't know. I'm not 100% concerned about his durability. And I know we were both pretty heavy on Costa to finish Luke Rockhold his last time out. The fact he couldn't finish a dusty Luke Rockhold tells me he's probably going to have trouble finishing Whitaker here, especially if he's only going to be going for those explosive strikes if he has Whitaker backed against the cage. I just think it's a tough spot for him. Whitaker does a good job fighting out of that wide stance, kind of forcing his opponents to fight moving backwards. Kosa does appear to be in excellent shape. He's certainly live for the upset here, especially if Whitaker's chin is suddenly dissolved. But I'm willing to go back to the well at least one more time here. The price is getting a little bit wide, but I think it's mostly warranted. We've seen Costa kind of struggle at times against guys like Adesanya who manage the range well. And I think the only other guy you could compare in that metric is a Robert Whitaker, 60% striking defense. Both these guys put out a lot of volume, but Rob's is more cerebral. I don't see much grappling taking place here on either side. And if Costa does go for takedowns, Rob does have that better than 82% takedown defense. I'm a little bit concerned because I was super confident in him against Duplessis, but Duplessis is champ now, so that makes me feel a little bit better. Costa, I love the guy, super entertaining fighter, but I think stylistically it's going to be tough for him to close that distance, tough for him to force Rob to fight off his back foot. Primarily a counter striker. Rob does a really good job kind of moving in and out of range, so I don't know. I think stylistically I'm fine going with Whitaker here. I think he gets it done, gets back in the win column, but I do think we see a good version of Costa. I'm guessing this one goes to the scorecards, probably 30-27 Whitaker performance. But yeah, I mean, Costa, he does have that power in his back pocket if he could find a place to land it. I just have trouble thinking he's going to get Rob cornered the way that Duplessis did.
Yeah, and I mean, I really did like the last two performances out of Costa. They weren't the best, but he was consistently putting out, volume. He was moving forward. He was aggressive. Some of the shots he was landing on Marvin Vittori would, take out most guys at middleweight. So he is it's still certainly got it. It's tough backing him. I agree, though. Fighting just twice since 2020 when he lost Israel Adesanya, only having those two appearances since. He seems to be giving his best effort every time out, but against the level of competition of a Robert Whitaker, I agree that Costa is gonna struggle quite a bit here. I mean, the last two fights were against lesser competition than that, and as you said, these more technical guys, the guys who could land counters at a better rate than Costa, the ones who could, yeah, get their shots on him without eating those huge power blows in return, are going to find the most success. Whitaker should be able to get back to his ways here. I don't want to say he necessarily underestimated Duplessis, but the way it was perceived going into that fight, it's like Duplessis was a lamb to the slaughter, and just to see it all flip like that, certainly I think we're going to get a better showing out of Whitaker this time. And yeah, Paulo Costa is not somebody that you're ever going to underestimate, disrespect. Yeah, we should see Whitaker on his A game, and for just 15 minutes needing to perform, I expect him to do so here. It's a little wide. I don't know necessarily if I'm going to be betting Whitaker a ton in this spot, but he is the better fighter, more complete fighter, and I see him getting a win this weekend.
One more thing I do want to add, and I'm on Whitaker, I'm backing him here, but one fear I have is USADA's gone now. And Paulo looks damn good. I mean, secret juice, meme or not, he's probably on something. And he's probably having an easier time kind of fooling the testing committees than he has in the past. So there'll be no blood tests in the morning that Paulo has dealt with throughout his career. There'll be no USADA knocking on his door the night before the fight. But yeah, I know he's probably been on something his whole career, but he's done a good job kind of avoiding failing those tests, and I think it's going to be even easier for him now. So just one thing to be slightly afraid of, but I still think Rob can keep the distance and get this done.
Secret Juice is the best base for MMA, without a doubt. The featured bout will be at welterweight. Ian Gary making his return here to face Jeff Neal. Ian Gary, the minus 240 favorite in this spot. I'm sticking with Ian Gary here, undefeated. I think he's going to keep that undefeated record intact here with a matchup with Jeff Neal. Jeff, I mean, still going out, proving himself to be all there, fighting a lot of these top welterweights the previous few years. Landing 5.2 significant strikes per minute. Great boxing, hands of steel, as the nickname says. I mean, he's somebody who is going to be in there standing and looking to bang with Ian Gary, and that's a style of fight that the Irishman's going to win 9 times out of 10. This kid's got really good striking. He's nearly doubling up opponents since joining the UFC, landing 6.6 significant strikes to just 3.5 that he's absorbing. Great boxing, feinting a lot, using it as a weapon, and then not only throwing low kicks in a high volume, but also using his kicks for ranged attacks, throwing them high, throwing them to the body of his opponents. And I think against somebody who in Neal is proven to be hittable, Gary's going to find a lot of success. Neal, not necessarily the easiest to finish. I think while Gary's going to be much faster, he probably won't find the shots to get Neal out of there. But I think he's going to be able to piece him up over the course of 15 minutes here if needed. He's really rounding into form. I think all the shit talk, social media, things like that, doesn't matter. He's still in there grinding day in, day out, and improving. I think we're going to see another good showing from me and Gary here as he ascends the welterweight rankings further.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough not to back Gary here stylistically. I do think his chin's a concern. I mean, we saw him dropped against Song Kanong. Even in his debut against Jordan Williams, he was rocked a little bit. Neal hits much harder than both those guys. Neal is one of the most powerful guys in the division. I'm just not sure I can back him given how difficult it's going to be to close that distance. As you mentioned, Neal takes a lot of damage in exchanges, almost absorbs 6 strikes per minute, which is obviously not a good thing here against Gary. The thing too is Wonderboy kind of gave the blueprint on Jeff Neal. There's not many fighters who kind of execute that. But I think if anyone can, maybe it is Gary. You stay on the outside, you circle away, you throw the leg kicks. Gary has had success against other southpaws. I believe D-Rod was a southpaw, right, where he set up that head kick. So yeah, I think stylistically this is a really good spot for Ian Gary. I think the UFC wants him to win. He's become a very controversial figure. I mean, I love the kid coming into the promotion. I hate listening to his interviews now. He's just obnoxious. Definitely a lot delusional in this guy, similar to what we were talking about with Topuria. But at the same time, I do think stylistically this is going to be a tough matchup for Jeff Neal. But I will say this: I mean, if Gary makes a mistake, Neal is very likely to capitalize. He made no mistakes against Neil Magny. He made no mistakes against Daniel Rodriguez, but against Kanan, we saw them. Against Green, pretty solid performance there. Against Weeks, he made a few mistakes. If the best Ian Gary shows up here, he should win this fight by decision pretty handily. But he's going to have to be careful in exchanges. If Neal just sells out and tries to crash the distance, I think he has a chance here. We saw that against Rachmanov, a fight not many people gave Neal a chance in, but he did give a really good showing of himself before he faded and then got submitted in that third round. So I don't know. I'm probably going to end up on Gary. I know when this fight was announced, I was pretty bullish on Neal, but watching film, kind of digging into the styles here, it is really a fight that the UFC is setting up for Ian Gary to win. I think the first time around on that Boston card, they knew what they were doing. Neal had to pull out, and then Gary had to pull out of his last fight against Luque, but there's a reason they're remaking this fight, so I don't know. Neal's live for the upset via KO. I think if he wins, it's going to come via KO. But it just seems more likely than not that Gary's going to dance around on the outside, kind of pick him apart at range, and then give a post-fight interview like he knocked his head off his shoulders Yeah, I'm going a little sour on Gary, but I do think he's probably the better fighter in this matchup, most likely to take place on the feet. And if Gary were to choose to grapple, I don't think it's going to be easy to take Jeff Neal down. But he's been working a lot with Damian Maia and Charles Oliveira, so he's only improving that part of his game as well. So I just think he probably has Neal covered here. You know me, I don't like to bet on power punchers to find that punch, and that's exactly what Neal's probably going to have to do here. So reluctantly backing Gary, but I do think he probably keeps the distance and gets this done.
All right, this fight at bantamweight between Merab Dvalishvili and Henry Cejudo. Merab, a minus 220 favorite in this spot against Cejudo, who last fought at UFC 288. A championship bout against Aljamain Sterling that, while close, ended up going to the champion. Um, Merab's teammate, Aljamain Sterling, who found success landing 4 of his 15 attempted takedowns against Henry Cejudo with 4 minutes of total control time. That was a 5 round bout. This here, a 3 round bout, with Merab likely to implement an even more grappling heavy game plan in his attempt to win against Henry Cejudo. Cejudo, obviously a credentialed wrestler, American gold medalist, somebody who has the ability to wrestle and counter wrestle with the best of them. I have some concerns here in this fight about Cejudo's ability to defend shots from Merab. Um, Even though I do believe a majority of the time he will be able to stuff them, Merab, if he does continue to come forward and attempt takedowns over and over and over again, like was the case in his last fight, facing Peter Yan, I could see him just winning due to a lack of offense thrown by Henry Cejudo. He's not able to, effectively land shots in the clinch, keep Merab off of him, get to some exchanges at boxing range. It's very hard for Henry to find a path to victory here in this spot. So while there is some value on him as a sizable underdog, I find it hard to see him getting his hand raised if he's not able to really put some combinations together and hurt Merab. We've seen that happen before, but with the streak that Merab is currently on, a clear path in his eyes for the bantamweight title shot. I think he is going to be able to get past Cejudo today. A bit of concern as well, Cejudo talking about retirement even heading into this fight. Obviously a concern, saying if this is not a win for him this weekend, it will be his last fight in MMA. I'd like to see him get the job done against Merab, but I think Merab's going to prove too much for him. Just move forward, head down, try all these takedowns against an American wrestling champion, and land enough to win the decision.
Yeah, I'm still kind of torn on this one. I hate Marab's style. I mean, he grapples and grapples, and even when he's not getting the takedowns, he's going to continue to go for them. And it works. I mean, it wins fights, especially over 5 rounds. I think the one thing that's maybe going to keep me on Cejudo here, and again, I'm not 100% sold on this. As we always say, check the article on Saturday for our final picks, is the fact that this is a 3 round fight. Cejudo hasn't fought 3 rounds in years. Against Sterling, I mean, his cardio held up well, but you have to think he was trying to manage that gas tank, especially after the long layoff. I think here he can be really aggressive. I think he's going to come at Marab, try to strike. Marab's going to get his takedown entries, probably take him down a few times, but Cejudo's going to be able to work his way back to his feet aggressively in a way that maybe he couldn't as frequently against Sterling, or I don't know. It's a weird kind of dynamic in that Sterling probably the better wrestler in terms of actually securing the takedowns than Marab, but Marab's gas tank and his relentless pressure makes him extremely difficult to deal with. I keep going back to this Aldo fight where Aldo managed to stay on his feet the whole time, but the pressure style of Marab won him that fight, even though he didn't really do much damage. It's a very similar matchup, and then I think Cejudo could maybe keep this standing. But is he going to be able to create enough space to land strikes? I'm not sure. So I think Maravi is the rightful favorite. I mean, he's just been tremendous. His style is ridiculous, very difficult for opponents to deal with. But at the same time, Cejudo does have that Olympic wrestling pedigree. He does have an 83% takedown defense in the UFC. He does average more than 2 takedowns per 15 minutes of his own. And I think if he is going to get the win here, he should look for takedowns of his own. Even if he's not securing them, you have to keep Marab moving backwards. His cardio is never going to fade. But as long as he's coming forward, he's just going to be a pain to deal with. I want to spend a little more time in this. I do agree with the retirement stuff. Whenever that word comes up, it is concerning. But I mean, I don't know. Here it's kind of obvious. It's like if he loses here, he's never going to compete for the title again. I mean, bantamweight is just so stacked. There's really no other matchups to make. I mean, with a win, he's going to be right there for the title. So I don't know. I am concerned that that's come up. I'm also concerned that he didn't train with Eddie Cha or Santino DeFranco and all this Coach Eric stuff, whether it was a meme or not. He wasn't with him for the entirety of this camp. One thing that tells me is maybe Cejudo's just collecting this last check, has to split it with less people, and he can just kind of pocket his show money and ride off into the sunset. But yeah, I'm gonna do a little bit more digging. Henry has a ton of stuff on his YouTube channel about his camp, everything like that. If I really think he's locked in here, I think there is value on him at the number. I thought he, maybe won that fight against Sterling. It was so narrow, you can't call it a robbery, but yeah, I don't know, man. It's just I never want to back Marab because I hate his style, but it wins fights, and it is what it is, and you kind of just have to deal with it. But Cejudo is kind of built to maybe deal with that. The other thing too, I mean, Cejudo's always the smaller guy at bantamweight. Marab's maybe the one other guy in the division who should probably be or could fight at flyweight if he wanted to. So yeah, I'm interested to see how these guys size up against each other. I want to pick Cejudo here, but I'm wondering if that's more just my heart than my head. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time digging into this one. But I think stylistically, it should be a fun and competitive fight. I really do think the 3 round nature of it, though, should help Cejudo to at least be competitive. If it was 5 rounds, Murad would be the play, no brainer, infinite cardio. But if Cejudo could be more aggressive and not only defending takedowns, working back to his feet, but also engaging in striking exchanges without the worry of being taken down, knowing he can just bounce back up, then maybe we do see something here that we haven't seen in a while, which is Marab on his butt. That fight against Moraes, I know it's a long time ago now, but yeah, Marab was very close to being finished there, and Cejudo does have kind of a similar style early on if he is going to be aggressive in his striking. So I don't know. Interesting matchup. Marab the rightful favorite. I'm looking for every reason I can to back Cejudo here. Haven't found enough yet to fully pull the trigger, but yeah, really great fight. Really definitely adds value to this card as far as a pay per view goes too. Just very interesting matchup.
Yeah, huge boost to the pay per view. Yeah, it's got to be like a knee in the clinch or like a tight elbow from Henry or front choke, something like that. I think he's going to need to pull off to be winning this fight just based on the way Marab does usually fight. Opening the main card is a very good fight at middleweight. Two streaking middleweights and a bit of a striker versus grappler matchup with Anthony Hernandez minus 245 favorite here against Roman Kopylov, who could be had at 2-1. Hernandez is impressive, obviously landing north of 2 takedowns per round in the UFC. Relentless, looking to grapple. Awesome at controlling opponents, keeping them underneath him, and converting those takedowns, finding submissions in a lot of his fights, and having immense cardio, just like Marab, to wear on guys, take them down over and over, and hold them on the mat for as long as his fights do last. Kopylov, 92% takedown defense in the UFC. It'll be interesting to see that tested here. He's also entering on a streak of 4 straight wins by knockout. This guy's locked in. Great kickboxer. Obviously the better striker in comparison to Fluffy Hernandez, but it will be a factor of whether or not Kopylov can keep this on the feet for as long as he needs to land that pivotal blow. He's got power though, and fights have been going to script for Hernandez. He's been able to implement his game plan, really wear on these guys in the latter half of these fights, taking over late. But if it's not going to script for him early, I could certainly see Kopylov paying off as a 2-1 dog here. I think he is going to end up being the play for me just based on the number. It's ballooned to this point now, and I'd be happy to jump on at a 2-1 price. I think he has the length to keep Hernandez off of him, at least in the early going. And as we've seen, 92% takedown defense, while that hasn't really been tested, we're going to see it put to the test here. And even just stuffing a few early shots from Hernandez is going to be tremendous for Kopylov's confidence and just the way his hands have been on fire lately. I don't mind backing him, hoping that he's able to catch Hernandez, someone we've seen put out before. So I think a viable underdog here on this card, Roman Kopylov.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy, especially at the number. I am going to back Hernandez here, though. I mean, we go back through Kopalov's record. His last loss came against a wrestler in Duraev, who's been cut from the promotion since because he really couldn't string together consecutive wins. But yeah, I mean, the 92 takedown defense looks good on paper, but a lot of that came in that Duraev fight. Duraev shot like I don't know how many times. I'd have to look into it, but he got enough takedowns to get what he needed and win that fight on the ground. Hernandez, pretty hype prospect coming into the promotion. Had that loss to Kevin Holland, but since then he's really looked excellent. Coming off a career best win over Edmund Shabazi and had a few fights canceled since then. Um, most of which weren't his fault though. I mean, this fight was scheduled back in I think um, September of last year, and interestingly enough, they did put it back together. He was scheduled to take on Ikram Aliskerov, and Aliskerov luckily pulled out. I think that was a much tougher matchup um, for Hernandez here, but it really does kind of show how highly the UFC thinks of him. Both these guys are really solid. I've been more impressed with Hernandez's wins in terms of level of competition. Both these guys have wins over Josh Friend, who I don't rate at all. The Ribeiro win for Kopolov was nice as it was a comeback, but other than that, I mean, Barrio, Shabazi, and Vieira, those are all better wins than we've seen from Kopolov. And like I said, the last time we've seen Kopolov fall was against a grappler. I just think he's Hernandez. If he can't find the takedowns early, he has the better cardio. He's going to wear on Kopolov. He just needs to hang on the feet for the first round, stay safe. It is a big cage with this being a pay per view event in front of a live crowd. I think that favors Hernandez here, even as the grappler, because he's going to be able to kind of manage that distance until he decides to start closing it. I don't think he's going to shoot right away. I think his striking has improved to the point that he can be at least competitive early with Kopolov here. Kopolov definitely live for the early KO. I don't blame you for maybe throwing some money on him over plus 200, which this line has definitely got a little bit out of hand. But I do think stylistically this is a tough matchup for Kopolov. I think the stats are a little bit deceiving because of that derived matchup, and it's a matchup he actually lost. So I don't know. I'm gonna go with Hernandez here. I really like him. I like just the grappler over the striker. Excuse me. Most of the time, could Kopolov catch him? But again, I'm not looking to back guys whose win condition is probably just via KO. So I'm on Hernandez here. I think he gets it done, but definitely wouldn't knock anyone taking the value side. The line has gone a little bit out of hand.
All right, you say grappler over striker. Mackenzie Dern facing Amanda Lemos here in the featured prelim. Dern, some would categorize the grappler in that case. Or are you leaning that way as the underdog?
No, the difference is Hernandez is a wrestler first, jiu-jitsu player second. Dern is a jiu-jitsu player first and a wrestler second. We saw her last time out against Andrade. Couldn't get the takedowns and got absolutely decimated on the feet. I think we see similar here. Lemos not quite as physical, obviously, as Andrade. I don't think any woman is. But at the same time, it is a similar stylistic matchup. I actually think Lemos is better on the ground than Andrade. She was dominated against Wei Li Zhang. But Wei Li is just a great compact wrestler, gets really low and secures her takedowns that way. And even then, Lemos did work her way back to the feet most of the time. Dern, kind of sub or bust at this point in her career. She has made improvements, looked really, really good in that fight against Angela Hill. I think it was May of last year, but it's I don't know. I just can't get that Andrade's performance out of my head. Dern also taking this fight on short notice. She left who was it? Yeah, I don't even know who's coaching her at this point. Um, she's kind of been all over the place.
Perillo?
Well, it was Perillo, but then Perillo stopped coaching her. She said in an interview she's back with Perillo, but he's not going to be cornering her here. Oddly enough, I guess he's just really focused on Cheeto's fight coming up or whatever. But it is interesting that like she still claims him as a coach, even though he's not here. Just weird. Just a lot of weird kind of out of the cage stuff surrounding Dern. Obviously, went through a tough divorce. I can't knock her on that, but you do know that's probably worn on her a bit. And as good as she looked in that Hill fight, this is just a tough matchup on short notice for her. Lemos a much better grappler than Hill, especially defensively, and Lemos a much more dangerous striker. So over the course of 3 rounds, I just think Lemos gets it done. Always some concern in backing a fighter coming off a title loss. I mean, we've seen major regression historically in spots like this, but again, on short notice, I think Lemos does enough on the feet to win this one, probably convincingly.
Yeah, I mean, we could reminisce about that title loss. We saw it here in Boston. Lemos was getting worked that first round. I mean, Wei Lee just on top, controlling her, raining down punches, could have been ended. Lasted through the full 5 round distance, so credit to her. But yeah, it's a concern here. I mean, Dern, obviously, the takedowns are not very effective. She's not great at securing and executing on her takedown attempts, but when she is on top, she's able to control opponents for full rounds if she's not able to find the finish before then. I think that's very much going to be the case here against Lemos. I think we are going to see at least one round of action where Dern is able to control Lemos on the mat. It could come down to a matter if she gets it done in that round or not. But even over the course of 15 minutes, I think she is live as the underdog here. I'm still a bit undecided about what my final pick will be, but Dern has looked a lot, improved on the feet, whether it's parallel or not. The jab is actually there. Certainly, she's not going to outstrike Lemos in this spot, but I think she could hold her own long enough there. And again, if she's able to just secure one or two takedowns, it's going to completely change the complexion of this fight. Obviously, her jiu-jitsu isn't quite the one punch, quick finisher that were kind of promised upon her entrance into the promotion, but she is becoming more complete of a fighter. I think Lemos is sort of on the other way. Now 36 years old, perhaps not going to have the career longevity that Dern still sees ahead of her. But yeah, super close fight here. Leaning the way of the underdog, but still a bit undecided. A heavyweight fight is what we will break down next between Marcos Rogerio de Lima, the minus 150 favorite here against Justin Tafa. Low-level heavyweights are, a great opportunity to lose money every week betting UFC. We do it every week. And, here in this fight, I think we have a great opportunity to lose on the underdog Justin Tafa. Marcos Rogerio de Lima, his last time out against Derek Lewis, favored, getting starched inside the first minute. While I don't think very highly of Justin Tafa or really either of these men, Tafa is a similar one punch kind of heavyweight one hitter that should be able to, if in a exchange with De Lima early, get his hands in there, plant his feet, and land. We saw that in the previous few fights for Tafa, aside from the one no contest by eye poke against Austin Lane, which in his last fight he finished Austin Lane with relative ease. I don't love the matchup here against Lima just because Lima is going to be the more complete martial artist, able to implement some wrestling here and there, or wear on Tafa if needed. But he really isn't that explosive of a heavyweight either. Obviously big at overhands, but when it comes to the fourth minute, fifth minute, or round one, we really can't rely on Lima for his cardio. And yeah, this is going to be a sloppy fight if it gets to round two. So let's hope that's not the case. Both very potent finishers. I think Tafa should be able to connect with a big overhand here and find that finish on to Lima. But city heavyweights. So curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a great fight. These guys aren't as low level as some of the other heavyweight fights we've been dealing with lately, but it's not high level either. I mean, the thing is, if Rodrigo de Lima decides to grapple, he should win here. That's probably why he's the favorite, but we really haven't seen him pursuing that in most of his fights. He didn't even have a chance against Lewis. I backed Lewis as an underdog against him, just mostly based on resume. And Lewis took him out with that flying knee, broke a bunch of his teeth, apparently, De Lima. He really got rocked in that spot. Like, he said he was feeling it for weeks. So, I don't know. I'm going to do a little bit more digging on the narrative side. Like, if I hear that Rodrigo de Lima is going to go grappling heavy here, maybe I decide to back him as the favorite. But if this is just on the feet, I agree with you in taking the underdog. I mean, Tafa, better striker at range, certainly more power, more likely to find that one shot KO. De Lima, durability, definitely a question mark coming off that last loss. So, I don't know. I think there is value on the Tafa side. I'm not 100% decided, though. I'd love to take De Lima if I was confident he was going to grapple. I'm just not at this time. So, Tafa, he's looked good lately, but it's against pretty terrible competition. Hunsucker, Porter, Austin Lane. Lost to Jared Vandera. Anyone who loses to Vandera probably shouldn't be putting money on them. And yeah, I hate to rip on these guys, um, but this is just one of the least interesting fights on the card, in my opinion. Gonna do a little bit more research. Definitely check the article out on Saturday. But yeah, it's heavyweights. Anything can happen. Flip a coin. Usually just take the plus money on that coin flip, and you're on the value. But yeah, I think the Lima does have a clear path to victory here if he chooses to grapple. It's just a question of whether he will.
Yep. And then the only path for Tafa, the knockout, which, it's plus 125, probably not much better if you play the prop there. All right, bantamweights. We have a fight between Rinya Nakamura minus 1300 against Carlos Vera, who could be had at plus 750. Yeah, this should be a bit of a smush fest. I am very high on this kid Nakamura. Since entering the UFC, he's looked great, but a very complete 8-0 coming into this fight here. Well, not the most experienced in terms of martial arts. He's a lifelong wrestler. He's been training for moments like this his whole life, growing up in the shadow of this Saitama Super Arena. Crazy hand speed. We saw what he was able to do in his UFC debut. He's really going to be better than Carlos Vera no matter where this fight goes. Clearly a feeder fight with the UFC giving the 36-year-old, fresh off a loss on Tough, to the very promising prospect. I think Nakamura is going to be able to do whatever he wants in this fight. Hopefully a finish in the first round, whether that be by wrestling, taking Vera to the mat, beating on him there, or finding a submission, or on the feet, as we've seen. Very capable of his hands. Huge speed advantage over Carlos Vera, and likely able to take him out by knockout if he goes that way. So I love this Nakamura kid. It's hard to bet him here. Maybe betting him under 1.5 or something like that. Really no value to be had, but he should smush Carlos Vera.
Yeah, Brady Highstand was scheduled to take on Nakamura here, which would have been a little bit more interesting, but I'm with you. Very high on the Japanese prospect. Vera probably wouldn't be in the promotion unless they needed this late notice replacement. 36-year-old making his UFC debut, never a good sign. Lost to Katona via decision, but Katona only wins via decision most of the time. And yeah, I mean, the one thing on Nakamura, I was pissed he couldn't finish Funny Garcia's last time out. Was very heavy on him inside the distance. But I'm with you. I mean, if we could find an angle, maybe under 1.5, or pick the KO versus the submission, either or, that's the only way you're going to be able to bet Rinya here. But yeah, I mean, the line's ridiculous, but outside of a freak injury, it really should be. Vera is getting fed to the wolves in this one. Not much more to say about it. Should be absolute domination.
Yeah, that one's an easy one. Light heavyweights here next, a bit tougher to break down. Zhang Mingyang, minus 120, facing off against Brenson Ribeiro, who could be had at even money. This should be a fun fight. I mean, two big light heavyweights, both very likely to strike just based on, their career resumes. I would categorize Ribeiro a bit more complete fighter. Sort of good dog value here, although we have seen a line begin to close. He's a finisher, just like Ming Yang, but Ribeiro's been fighting the better competition in leading up to this fight here. He has a 3-2 record entering this bout, but it is worth noting all of those have ended inside of the first round. For Zhang Ming Yang, willing to engage as well. 9 straight fights ending inside of the first round. He has won inside of the first round. Also on a streak of his past 13 fights, all ending inside the first round, with a record of 11-2 in there. Again, it's garbage competition that Ming Yang's been facing, but he has looked very good. A play on the under 1.5 here, you're paying like minus 330. But I find it very likely that one of these two is going to find a finish materialize very early here. It's a play largely based on level of competition. I think Ming Yang really is a good striker. Although these guys that he's facing are just standing there and eating these shots. I think he is going to be able to put it together against some guys in the UFC. But this is a super volatile fight. I think the more complete package that I've seen is from Ribeiro, who's fought the better guys. So that's the way I'm leaning. But definitely don't see this fight being much longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I do need to spend a little bit more time on it. But interestingly enough, I mean, both these guys were massive underdogs their last fights. Ribeiro on Contender Series was supposed to lose to Lopez. Zhang was a massive underdog.
400, 500, yeah.
Yeah, and they wrote to UFC tournament. So both these guys, I mean, odds makers weren't really liking them coming in, and it wasn't because of their offense; it was because of their defense. They're both there to be hit in exchanges earlier in their respective careers. They've both been KO'd a bunch, and they're both going to come forward and just swing. So, yeah, the under makes sense. There's a reason it's totally juiced, though. It's going to be tough to find value on that. I'm going to do a little bit more film on these guys. I did watch the recent fights, but it's tough to really pull anything from these fights when these guys are scoring these early finishes. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think whoever is more defensively sound probably gets the win. It's just going to be a matter of who lands in that wild exchange. Like, I'd be surprised if this one got extended. I will say this though: there's a lot of times these matchups get made. Both these guys go through their camps. They have coaches in their ear. They know what they're getting into. It's their UFC debut, and it's like, okay, it's power versus power. Whoever is more cerebral here, whoever's the better defensive guy, ends up winning the fight. So just go in there, be smart, wait for your opening, and then they just stare at each other for a round. So maybe there might be some value on the over 1.5, but I don't know. That's me kind of reaching for something to bet here. Gonna spend more time on this one. I think whoever wins is gonna do it in spectacular fashion. Um, but yeah, both these guys, these are off one fight, landing over 8 significant strikes in the UFC while absorbing more than 5 per minute. Just ridiculous. This should be absolute chaos for however long it lasts. Relatively low level, honestly. I don't expect much from either of these guys as far as their UFC careers go. But they will be in fun fights, and they're going to be there to exchange. It's just a matter of who lands the KO first. Both very powerful, a couple of glass cannons coming forward. Who shatters? I don't know yet. Again, check out the article on Saturday, but certainly one of the more volatile fights on the card.
Yeah, should be a fun one. And now we'll dive into the early prelims. Again, the card kicks off 6:30 Eastern Time. This is the final early prelim, a welterweight bout between Danny Barlow and Josh Quinlan. Barlow, the minus 200 favorite in this spot against Quinlan, who could be had plus 170. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, this one's tricky. I mean, there's a lot of hype surrounding Barlow coming into this fight, and it's warranted. His left hand is a fight ender. Tremendous power out of this guy. Really good striker. Looks good on the feet. But at the same time, he has a massive hole in his game when it comes to the grappling. Certainly something I'm sure he's been improving. But yeah, you go through some of those early fights of his, watching some of this film for CFFC. Decent promotion, but yeah, he gets taken down. He really struggles to work his way back to his feet. And we hear about Quinlan. He's like kind of a gym hero in that he's really great in practice, this really solid grappler. But we don't see him really execute that part of his game when he is in actual fights. So if I thought Quinlan was going to grapple aggressively here, kind of similar to the Delima matchup, I like him as an underdog. It's just I don't know that we'd see that, and I do think Barlow is more likely to land his power. Um, Seems pretty durable too. We've seen him take some shots in the regional scene, so I don't know. I think Barlow, if this stays standing, probably gets it done via KO. Quinlan, bit of a disappointment coming off that loss to Trey Flowers, but if Quinlan's going to execute a grappling heavy game plan here, I do think he's very live as an underdog. I'm going to have to do some more digging. Again, these guys lower on the card, they don't have the official UFC interviews. You got to kind of go on YouTube, see who's actually taking the time to interview these guys. So I'm going to be doing that this evening and into the weekend. But yeah, if it's on the feet, Barlow's the play. I think his power is tremendous. And if I'm confident Quinlan's going to start to grapple, maybe he can get it done. But yeah, Barlow does seem like the real deal, at least on the feet. I'm just not sure the grappling's where it needs to be yet. But yeah, that's why they're going to fight. And hopefully we find out on Saturday.
I feel like Quinlan is going to go ahead and grapple in this spot, although that's not normally the course of action he would take in his fights. He seems keen to strike a majority of the time. He probably would in some matchups more favorable than this one, but Barlow seems like it's going to be a problem for Quinlan to deal with here at welterweight. Barlow not only fighting out of the opposite stance as Quinlan in the southpaw, but benefiting from a 7-inch reach advantage and an advantage in height over Quinlan as well. I think it's going to be tough for Quinlan to execute on takedowns given the length of Barlow. Obviously, if he's successful getting him down, it's a completely different story. But I think a lot of the shots are going to be more panic based as well. Dealing with someone so long, so powerful, kind of rushing in and not executing the shots in the way he may be able to when training. So I think Barlow is, as you said, perhaps the real deal. Still undefeated, but a thunderous puncher. Really good boxing and really good striking for MMA. So, if these two are going to exchange for a prolonged period on the feet, Barlow's going to be able to crack Quinlan hard. We've seen the power out of Quinlan in the past, but I mean, Jason Witt, like, it's not necessarily sustained power through the course of his, entire resume. And even in previous fights, he was abusing. So, not necessarily somebody who I want to back for his hands. And in a matchup against a striker that I feel is much superior, got to go with Barlow here. Seems like a properly lined fight to me with Barlow the minus 200 favorite. All right, and next another matchup at welterweight. This between Oban Elliott and Valentin Woodburn. Many of you will remember Woodburn from his matchup last with Bo Nickel, a short notice appearance where Woodburn moved up to 185 pounds and was finished in 10 seconds by Bo Nickel. This is a matchup, obviously, to get it right for Woodburn by the UFC, giving him another opportunity. Although it is coming against a bit of a hype prospect as well in Oban Elliott, somebody who we've seen proven himself prior in Cage Warriors. An effective grappler, somebody who I think is probably going to look to wrestle a bit with Woodburn here in the spot. Woodburn's somebody who's not really the most sophisticated in terms of his overall game, but he is normally marching forward. Normally looking to dig in with big, powerful hooks and land meaningful shots to his opponents, but pretty effective at counter wrestling as well. I don't want to say the guy's top heavy, but certainly a lot of upper body strength and the ability to chuck off a lot of shots that come in from opponents without the best intent behind them. Elliott's normally somebody who is persistent executing when he wants to get fights onto the mat, and effective in his strikes as well. I'm not going to say Woodburn's much superior to Elliott on the feet, if he even is. So Elliott is properly priced as the favorite in the spot. I just think there's some value on Woodburn. Obviously, with the power we've seen sort of on his regional come up, if he is able to stuff a couple early shots from Elliott, maybe the kid kind of freezes up against somebody with that strength, and then he does have the power to put anyone away in this weight class. So I'm probably not going to end up pulling the trigger on Val Woodburn here, but I'm certainly not all the way convinced by Oban Elliott, although what we've seen thus far has been solid.
Yeah, I do think Elliott's overrated. I don't want to back him minus 300 against anyone really, but I do think it's a matchup he should win. I mean, more than anything, Elliott's proven to be more durable than he was earlier in his career. We see him take a lot of shots in these wars for Cage Warriors against pretty decent level of competition. And while he looks sloppy at times on the feet, he does do a decent job kind of rolling with strikes and things like that. So yeah, Woodburn here, maybe live for the upset via KO if he can stay on the feet, but I do think Elliott can get his grappling going. The other thing too, I mean, Elliott does have pretty solid cardio. Woodburn has won a few decisions, but I would have to give the cardio edge to Elliott. But yeah, I think should be a relatively competitive fight on the feet. I do think the grappling's probably the difference here, though. But honestly, a lower level matchup than maybe people are realizing. Elliott, I don't know. He's a fun character. He's got Chael Sonnen backing him. I mean, he's been kind of talking his crap for years over at Cage Warriors, but lately a lot of the prospects coming over from there haven't been as strong as maybe we hoped they'd be. And I kind of put Oban Elliott into that category. Earlier in his career, knocked out by Michael Figlak, which is never a great sign. He does have some nice wins since then, though, including his Contender Series win over Brito and James Sheehan with Cage Warriors. Pretty decent competition. I mean, Woodburn, yeah, he was thrown to the fire against Nickel. I do like that the UFC's giving him a chance here, but it does feel like they're trying to build up this Welsh prospect. Yeah, trains under Jack Shore's father at Shore Mixed Martial Arts. Very good understanding of cage wrestling. Not only wrestling in open space, but wrestling specifically for MMA, which I do think is probably the difference here. I'm curious in the over-under. I know everyone likes to think of Woodburn as kind of this one-punch guy, and given the wide line, I'm guessing a lot of people like Elliott inside the distance, but both these guys, when they faced upper-level competition outside of the Nickel fight, they've gone the distance. So I think there's a good chance this fight sees the scorecards. Probably Elliott who gets it done, mostly working his grappling, scoring some ground and pound. But Woodburn's proven to be pretty damn durable, and as long as he's fighting someone other than Bo Nichols. So I don't know. I'd probably back the over here at the number before I'd go on Elliott as a massive favorite, but I do agree that Elliott is the proper favorite.
Yeah. All right, and the last fight for us to dissect a women's flyweight bout between Miranda Maverick and Andrea Lee. Maverick, the favorite in this spot, minus 190 against Lee, who could be had at plus 160. Lee is on a streak of 3 straight losses coming into this fight. Last saw her in Boston as well. That loss against Natalia Silva. Now 35 years old, not necessarily the best out of Lee. These recent performances, but still holding her own. I think in this matchup against Miranda Maverick, it's going to be an issue due to Maverick being physically stronger, able to strike the Lee and landing the more meaningful shots. I think while Lee is oftentimes went on the feet with her opponents for a prolonged period, able to outvolume them. Certainly nearing 5 significant strikes landed per minute in her tenure of the UFC. And while she's effective with her takedowns as well, I don't see that being to an extent of much here against Miranda Maverick, who, while we have seen her on her back in the UFC already, she's normally the one pressing forward and securing takedowns of her own against these girls that don't necessarily have the strength to defend or intelligently counter. Lee does have solid, sneaky jiu-jitsu that could prove a problem for Maverick if they are, on the mat for quite a while here. But I think generally the strength of Maverick wins out. She's been fighting a bit better lately, and the rightful favorite in the spot. Not saying necessarily at minus 190. I will be betting any money on her.
Yeah, I think I have to back Maverick here, probably expecting her to grapple heavily. Lee did look a lot better than I thought she would against Macy Barber. Got completely picked apart on the feet against Silva her last time out, but Silva's on a trajectory to eventually compete for the title, so don't want to put too much on that. When it comes to level of competition, Andrea Lee has been facing a really quality level of opponent. I mean, beating Calvillo, whatever, but after that, I mean, she's losing to Arujo, Barba, and Silva, really, really solid opponents. Maverick, very inconsistent in her performances. I mean, she looks great at times, terrible in others, but it's such a clear path for her here. If she can ground Lee, I think she'll be fine. Lee, just a 54% takedown defense in the UFC, probably not quality enough to keep Maverick off her for 3 rounds. Lee is very tall, Maverick is not. They're listed only 3 inches apart. That seems wrong to me. If Maverick struggles to take Lee down, I think Lee could be a really good live bet, so just keep an eye on that. If you are watching this in a state that does have live betting, legal sportsbook, whatever. But yeah, I mean, pre start of the fight, I think you have to take Maverick here, the younger fighter. She's been doing a lot of grappling competitions lately. I think she won some competition at the brown belt level, which is honestly pretty impressive. So I do like Maverick here to get it done. Lee certainly in the twilight of her career, but I don't know that she's slowed down as much as maybe people think she has. But looking at the line, I'm honestly pretty happy at the price of Maverick. I thought she'd be an even bigger favorite here, and that would scare me. But sub minus 200, I think around if you can get her around minus 180, actually decent value on that price. And then if you see that she's not able to take Lee down right away, or struggling to find those entries, then maybe just bet Lee live and kind of hedge yourself out of that situation. But I think Maverick should be able to get the grappling going here. Much better fighter on the ground, especially at this point in their respective careers.
All right. Well, Nick, it's been a pleasure, as always, breaking down UFC 298 with you. Certainly looking forward to these fights on Saturday. As always, you will want to check out our final prediction for each of these fights on Dine Sports come Saturday. And we hope, as always, you enjoy these fights. Volkanovski versus Topuria this Saturday.
Take care, everyone.